Shalom Parashat Vayakhel. These Jews are impossible to understand. You ask them to contribute to the golden calf, they give. You ask them to contribute to the tabernacle of the Lord, they give. What's up with that? Jews always need a cause. If they're Torah Jews, it'll be a Torah cause. If they're not, they'll find another cause, some better, some worse. But Jews always need a cause. But there is one subset of Jews that is a little more discriminating. I refer to the women. Said King Solomon, I have not found one woman amongst all of these. And the rabbis say, what is he talking about? He's talking about those who contributed to the golden calf. The women did not contribute to the golden calf. The women are very much featured in this week's Parsha as major contributors to the tabernacle, and they are praised for having not contributed to the golden calf. The Torah says, for example, that the women came together with the men to make contribution. Why so? There's a halachic reason, perhaps, to make sure that the women knew that their husbands would agree that if they're going to give some of the jewelry that perhaps the husband got for them, that the husband agrees there shouldn't be dissent, there shouldn't be a fight. That's one explanation. But another explanation is simply that the women wanted to make sure that the money was going, or the jewelry was going to a good cause. Because when the golden calf was being made, Aaron had told the men, bring me your women folks' jewelry. And the women, therefore, did contribute to the golden calf, but not knowledgeably. They didn't do it intentionally. Their husbands took their stuff. So this time they came along to say, hey, I want to see what you're doing with this. I want to make sure this is going to a tabernacle and not to a golden calf. And the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer HaMedrash also stresses the merit of the women who did not contribute to the golden calf. And the Dad Zikanim explains that you might think that maybe they didn't give to the golden calf because they simply didn't want to part with their jewelry. They liked all that stuff and so they didn't want to give to anything. So the Dad Zikanim commentary then answers, so we see that not only did they not give to the golden calf, the fact that they came and did give to the tabernacle shows that they didn't give to the golden calf because they felt it was wrong, and they gave to the tabernacle because they felt it was right. And Rav Moshe Feinstein gives a beautiful explanation that they came wearing their jewelry in order to emphasize how dear these contributions were to them, how willing and happy they were to take off the earrings and the necklaces and give them right there to the tabernacle. So with all of this praise of women, how come we have this popular conception that women are looked down upon somehow in Judaism? It even made its way onto television in the United States. A 1970s TV show called All in the Family has one feminist character complaining that Jews bless a blessing, thank God for not making me a woman. So there is a certain impression, and indeed the rabbis discourage women from studying the Talmud at a high level, something which nowadays is I believe, a different situation, but once upon a time that certainly was the case. How so? How so in the light of the fact that the sages themselves tell us in the Parsha of Bereshit that when God built the rib of Adam to create woman, the word vayiven is the same root as bina, as understanding, that women have a higher level of understanding than men do. And there were great women Talmudic scholars. There was Beruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir, who won debates among the scholars. And there was, of course, Devorah the prophet, and there were others. So the question is, how come, if women have such a high intellect, they have a higher level of understanding than men, how come they're not encouraged, for example, to study Talmud? And what does that blessing that the man says really mean? So I think that we need to understand exactly what what does it mean that women have a higher level of understanding? Bina yetera. I think it means simply their heads are on straight. The women's blessing, that is the parallel to the man's blessing when he says, thank God for not making me a woman, is Sha'asani kirtzono. She blesses, thank God for making me according to your will. My teacher, Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, gives a very long explanation of this. I will give the shorter version, but basically he says the following, that God has a will, a desire for what mankind should look like in the future. And that desire is a world of peace. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and all of that, neither shall they learn war anymore. Men will become peaceful. That is the goal for mankind, and says Rabban, that is where women are already. They have their heads on straight. They see the way humanity must be. because men are thrown by passions. Men make war because they have anger, they have hatred, and that motivates them to make war. And then, of course, they do have logic, they have understanding, but they will twist it in order to justify the war. One of my favorite historical episodes is when the Germans at the beginning of World War I were reassuring the Belgians that they wanted to protect Belgian neutrality. And they said to them the following: "We think Belgium must remain neutral and we want to protect that because we've heard that the French, if there's a war between Germany and France, will violate Belgian neutrality. So please let us send our armies through your country in order to protect your neutrality." Got that? That's how logic can serve to the exact opposite end. Women have their heads on straight and they say, "What are you talking about?" And so too the men said, "Moses is missing. Moses is not here. What are we going to do?" They're panicked. They have fear. Again, out of control emotions. So we have to do something. We need a leader. Let's make a golden calf. We're not going to really worship the golden calf. We worship God, but the golden calf will focus our prayers. It'll be something to concentrate on. And that's what we're going to do. And the women look at that and they say, "You're making a golden calf. What is wrong with you?" Because that is their higher level of understanding. Their heads are on straight. And perhaps this is why there was a reluctance to encourage women to become Talmudic scholars, because sometimes a little too much knowledge of how to make arguments and logic can cause one to lose sight of the ultimate straight goal, which is to bring the world to a better place. And we therefore sing a praise of women in the Eshet Chayil in the evenings of the Sabbath, because they are the ones who ensure the Jewish future, because their heads are on straight. A couple of other examples: that the women bring mirrors to contribute to the tabernacle to be used in the wash basin for the Kohanim. And Moses at first didn't want to take those mirrors. Why? They're a little immodest. They were used by the women in Egypt to make themselves very physically attractive to seduce their husbands. Does that have a place in the tabernacle? And God says, "Oh, and how it does. Those are even more dear to me than the other gifts." Why? Another perfect example of women's higher understanding. When Pharaoh had decreed that all of the male children had to be drowned, the men were distraught and they said, "We can't be with our wives. We're not having children just to have that be done to them." So they separated from their wives. And the rabbis tell us that Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, came to her father Amram after he separated from Yocheved and said, "You're worse than Pharaoh." Worse than Pharaoh? Yes, because Pharaoh only made a decree against the boys. But if you're not going to be with my mother and have more children, there won't be girls born either. And the women of that generation also did not accept this, and they made themselves beautiful with those mirrors to make sure that there would be a Jewish future. And therefore God said, "This is more dear to me than anything else." Because the men made a decision with their flawed logic, and the women with their superior logic said, "End the Jewish people? Have you lost your mind?" That is what it means to have your head on straight. The women were the ones who wove. They wove the materials of the tabernacle. They weren't involved in the big, grandiose pieces with the gold and the silver and the famous sketchings and engravings. That's for the men. But without the materials that the women woved, there wouldn't be a tabernacle. All of the things would be exposed to the elements, they would fall apart, because the women see straight to how to ensure the Jewish people. And that is what it means when the woman says, "Sha'asani kirtzano," God made me tuned in to his ultimate goal for the Jewish people. And because of the women, and because of the Sabbath, which is also in the Parsha, the Jewish people will continue from week to week, year to year, generation to generation, and the women will play a central role in keeping us focused on the ultimate goal, which is the redemption, the peace of the world, and the peace in the home, and the future of the family.